Our guest for this session of The Mindset Shift is Colin Gordon, author of Marketing is in Trouble and founder of Engage Consulting. He has extensive experience in FMCG, having worked in various leading organisations at senior level for over 25 years. He is a former chief executive of Glanbia Consumer Foods and a marketeer with decades of experience in Irish business. He now currently holds the position of non-executive director at Feb Wines. He is also a board member of Concern Worldwide, where he chairs their Business and Organisational Development Committee. In his recent book, Marketing is in Trouble, Gordon does a deep dive into what's wrong with marketing and how we can fix it. Colin, welcome to The Mindset Shift, and great to have you, and looking forward to chatting to you today.
Thanks, Tim. Good to see you.
So tell me, who is Colin Gordon? You know, where are you from, your background, those type of things, before we get into this sort of more mundane stuff of the business world and the challenges we all face in the current environment.
Yeah, well, so I'm from Dublin originally. I was born on the same day of the same month of the same year as Barack Obama, and that's where the similarity finishes. So I'm 50, that sort of shows my age. I'm 59 years of age since August. I went to a local school here in close to where I live in Dalkey, which is Christian Brothers in Monkstown. I went on from there to Trinity College, and from there went on to UCD and did a master's. I did an undergrad in business studies in Trinity, and then a postgrad in UCD. I come from a family, and my mother was from a farming background in County Tipperary. My father was in business from when he left school. He was originally in sales and then general management. He was a sales rep and would have been away a fair amount. In the old days, you were effectively a traveller, and you travelled the country, and that's what he would have been known as. Then went into a general management. I have a number of brothers and sisters. And we all live in Ireland, which I guess is a bit unusual, having come through the formative years in our kind of 20s when we were in the 1980s. A lot of people would have left at that stage. Most of my friends who left college came back as the economy turned, and they got the experience or the qualifications overseas. I was lucky enough that I didn't have to leave Ireland. When I left college, I'd been lucky enough. When I was in college, I was able to do everything from selling secondhand doors in Australia for one summer, which is a whole story in itself, to working on farms through my mum's family. But then I began to do some research work for what is now called IBEC, and at the time was called the Confederation of Irish Industry, CII. And I did work for them on statistical analysis and some research, which gave me a sense of, I guess, office life and business life in a very practical way. I was able to use that to help fund my master's. And while doing the master's, I obviously made some kind of impression on someone. I was asked to stay on in UCD and to work for them for a year. And that was really quite an exciting period. It was a pilot program for what is now an MSc in marketing practice. And it was the pilot program run by Tony Cunningham. I ran it. There was a whole bunch of what were business graduates who at the time were looking for experience. And I had to manage them by effectively developing a consulting model where we would find client companies who wanted projects done in the marketing area, and we would match what were known as advisors with clients and march on. And the pilot ran very well, and I was able to leave after a year, which was the agreement. I went into Johnson & Johnson, and that began my experience.
Before we go into your experience, let's just go back to Dalkey. I'm always fascinated about, what it was like for your upbringing in Dalkey. Yeah. What were the things that a normal family did in Dalkey in the sort of 60s and 70s?
Yeah, so we would have spent a lot of my summers down in the country, down with my mum's family, or on the seaside. I live in Dalkey. We're just below Dalkey Hill here, so I know this from the lockdown times. We're 2.2 kilometres from the 40-foot, okay. And I would have spent a lot of time growing up swimming all summer long. When I wasn't down the country, I would have been swimming every day. diving off rocks, out on bikes. If the weather was very bad, we used to have Monopoly marathons. If the weather was halfway good, we used to have tennis championships or chess championships. It was just, we looked after ourselves, to be honest. We had great fun, good friends, good family connections in the area and down the country. And I can't remember, this might sound very sort of Pollyanna-ish, but I can't remember bad times. And I know times were difficult for my parents. My father's originally from Dalkey, so we're relatively unusual. Where my kids are the fourth generation of people living in the Dalkey area. That's quite unusual because it's built up and hard to get houses here. Most of it's rocks. You can't build on the rock. My father's sister, who lived quite close to us, passed away suddenly, and then God love us, her husband died quite soon afterwards. So my parents ended up taking in my two, at the time, very young cousins, and they were treated as our sisters. And my mother also looked after the 5 boys in the family. 4 of them really. One was old enough to kind of help out with mum. So my mother ended up looking after her husband's nephews and nieces, and we reared 2 of them as our own, and still would consider them to be sisters. So we just thought it was just more people to have fun with, more people to squash into the car. It must have been horrendous for my parents. It must have been truly horrendous for my parents. And you look back at it, and if someone said to me in the morning, by the way, there's 2 more coming in, are you ready for it? I actually don't know what I would do, but my parents, who were saintly people, and if you think of what they had to do, just rocked up and looked after them with all of the expense and the house wasn't big enough. They had to extend the house. They had to forego foreign holidays, but that's what you did. This is now before TUSLA and before adoption systems and all the rest are in place. It's just what you did as a family. And we never really questioned it or challenged it. We just got on with it. And that would have been from when we were just about 10 till now, I guess, in whatever way, but all the way through their schooling and their formative years. So it was a very busy house, very, I'm sure there were lots of challenges, but it was always a sense where everyone was welcome. There were friends coming and going all the time. I wanted to go to college. There was never a question of, are you doing the right course? Are you going to the right college? Going to Trinity at the time was relatively unusual. So it was, but there was never a question about, why not one of the other colleges? And I'm not trying to, sort of paint things in a kind of very adversarial effect about what Trinity was or wasn't, but it was unusual for people going from Christian Brothers to going into Trinity. There were a lot of people going at the time. Blackrock was starting to go there. Michaels were beginning. Monkstown was slow to be going. But at the time, it was funny actually when you think of it. And I can only imagine how tough it is for kids now and the Leaving Cert kids who have just come through the lockdown and all of the schooling issues that are surrounded that. But at the time, you did the Leaving Cert and you could do the Trinity matriculation and the UCD matriculation, or the NUI matriculation as it was. Now the matriculation is all built into the Leaving Cert. So at the time, I decided I'll play all the numbers, all red on the roulette table. So I did the Trinity matric in April, the Leaving Cert at the end of May, and the NUI matric at the end of June. So it was continuous exams. I remember at the time I got my Trinity matric results. Brilliantly, Trinity, in its old-fashioned way, considered Latin the same as maths. So if you got an honour in Latin, and I did Latin in school, it was considered the same as having an honour in maths. And that was kind of gold, to be honest. So I remember getting my Leaving Cert results, and I was already in college at this stage. All I had to do was physically do the Leaving Cert to prove that I was kind of upright and kind of able to hold my own. But what I got didn't matter at the time. And I remember going in to get my results from the principal in school, and the vice principal passed over the envelope to me and said, well done, Colin, better than we expected. Hang on a second. And I remember it stuck me at the time. I said, I'm going to show these. And it's not, the Christian Brothers, they were fine to me. I'm sure they weren't fine to a lot of other people. They were fine with me. But I just thought it was a very past remarkable remark. Rather than congratulations or, geez, God, you must be delighted. but I was already in college, so they hadn't even asked about the Trinity matric. And the Leaving Cert was okay, and the NUI was okay, and that was my education. It began. Well, it was the beginning of my post Leaving Cert education was walking out of the principal's office in Monkstown in I guess the middle of August 1979. The way our schooling worked out, my adopted sister, my natural sister, and myself all did the junior cert and the Leaving Cert at the same time. So the three of us doing the junior cert, inter cert as it was, three of us doing the Leaving Cert. So it must have been just mayhem. Or else we were all such good students that no one heard a word from us for months on end, and they didn't know we were around at all. I'm not sure which was more appropriate, to be honest. So it was busy, challenging, but there was never a sense of you can't, or you won't, or you shouldn't. You just got on with it, and you got on with stuff over the summer. You got on with I wanted to go to Australia for a period of time. Second year in college had a particularly long summer break. So I was able to go to Australia for 4 months, and I ended up staying with relatives out in Perth in Western Australia and getting a job selling second-hand doors, which was an education in itself. A guy had just emigrated from the UK to Australia. He was trying to make his way in the world. He actually was trying desperately to make a loss. And I remember one day he went home and said, "Colin, can you look after the store?" There was only two of us in the place. Big store, two of us, we could manage it. And he said, "Will you look after the store? I'm going home to do the books." And I went, "Listen, I'm doing business studies in college. I'm nearly expert in this area, second year, what the hell?" And he said, no, Colin, you're making a mistake. I'm going home to the books. So I said, "I'm just trying to bring them in. We can go through them together." "Colin, I'm going home to do the books." So the following day he came in. But that was the following day was him gone. I was looking after the store. He came in on what would have been, say, the third day in that case. And I said, "How'd you get on?" He said he was delighted. He made a loss. And he wanted to because he was able to hide cash is what he was trying to do, having brought money in from the UK. I always got the impression that he had to leave the UK, that there was a lot of tax owing and he needed to get out quickly. But he didn't want to give it all to the Australian government as much as he didn't want to give it to the UK government. So that was interesting. I spent time traveling around Western Australia at the time, and came home to go back to college. And I remember I funded my trip by buying two calves and selling them as yearlings. All I had in my bank account or my post office account, whichever it was £100. And it was £50 a calf. So I went to my uncle, who was my godfather, and I said, "Well, could you buy calves?" He said, "Well, yeah." And I'll rear them. My gift to you is I won't charge you vet fees. I won't charge you any of the feed. It'll just go in. And I said, "Well, you have to sell them in a year." And I know the way of making, at the time was £500 to fly from London to Australia. Okay. And it was £5 to get from here to London if you went on the Magic Bus. So he came back and said, "There's your £500, which is a year later." I was planning for a year. The best possible way was Qantas out of Heathrow, got to London on the Magic Bus, which was, I'm not sure if many of your listeners will remember it, but it was basically got on a bus. You got on the boat in Dalkey, which is just down the road from us, got on the bus at the far end, and they drove through the night to get to the Euston station. And then I went on to Heathrow and on to Australia. But they would swap drivers on the motorway while driving. One guy would stand up, the other guy sitting behind him. And the whole idea was get to London as cheaply and as easily as possible. So stopping for refreshments, that was never going to happen. Stopping for a loo break, good luck with that. That was never going to happen. In this rickety old bus that got you to London on the beginning of a huge adventure. And it was a huge adventure.
What's interesting listening to that part of the story, and we're still obviously only in your second year in college, is the challenge for your mother. I mean, first of all, the fact that you brought on two sisters and she had 5 other children that she had to be 5 boys she had to be conscious of from the family. Your father was a traveller. He was a sales rep, but a traveller they would have been called back then. And it was traditional for travellers to stay overnight. That was part of what they did. It's very different now because of the road infrastructure. People can get back from more locations. You can get back from Cork in 2.5 hours now if you want to get back, where back then it was a 4.5, 5 hour journey. So people just didn't get back. And also the cars weren't as powerful, etc. The Magic Bus, I worked in the UK for a period of time.
And I just go from, I didn't get to any exotic place like Australia. I got to Burnley at the north of England. And I had an aunt living, God rest her soul, in London. So every weekend I wanted to go to London to spend time with my aunt because I was very lonely over there. And I just get on the National Express. And I just get down to the National Express. It was 11 o'clock in the morning at night. And you arrive in London at 6 o'clock in Victoria Station. It was the most terrifying bus journey I can remember. We did stop, I have to say, for some refreshment for 50 minutes. We didn't change bus drivers, but the quality of the people on that overnight bus, and then I had to do the reverse on the Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. back, was really questionable for a young 18 or 19-year-old child out of Ireland at a point in time when an 18, 19-year-old person then was much younger in its experience compared to the people of today because of technology and infrastructure. And then you'd get off at Victoria. And then I had to get an underground into a tube and go from Victoria, which is central London, right out to the East End and then walk up and walk. And I just remember saying to myself, people do this all the time. I was doing it for a number of months. And it's an experience a bit like yours in the Australian where, the businessman wanted to lose money. And obviously most of us in business want to make money. All those experiences, Colin, hold us in good stead, particularly in our formative years when you're sort of post-leaving or post-second level school into your sort of early years, I think. And your story is no different. But what I really admired about your story so far is your mother and your father. And the price they paid. I always talk to my clients about you must pay a price, to be successful, to bring your business forward. The price they paid to look after, your cousins, to raise their own family with the same gusto that they were doing anyway, pre that sadness of losing their two parents. And it culminated in your case in 3 members of the one family doing the Leaving Cert in the same year, just as a light-hearted moment. You got to Trinity, so you obviously did really well. But as regards the results of the Leaving Cert, it's now 41 years ago. Where did you come in the pecking order? And don't be bashful about it now, Colin, because
my sister always wanted to go and be a teacher, so she did an arts degree and only ever did want to go to UCD and she's now a principal of a school here in Dublin, secondary school in Dublin, and she's done postgrad. This, that, and the other. And my cousin, who's exactly the same age as me, bar a couple of days or a couple of weeks, she went on and did nursing. And she now lives out in Meath and she was working in the convention centre, but that's kind of a bit staggered right now, obviously, with unless you remember the dole going in and out of there all the time. Pecking order, there was never a sense of competition. And I'm not just saying that. There was never a sense of competition about how many points to get or where do you get in the exams. We helped each other. We did our own kind of, the way you challenge people, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. They do come back with an answer, or will you ask me questions and I hope to have an answer. We didn't do the same subjects. So I did Latin. None of the others did Latin. I did geography. My sisters didn't do geography. So it wasn't that easy to compare. And it's very strange to, I didn't expect this part of the conversation to go up at all. I don't like comparisons, never did. Never really liked to, are you doing better or worse, or how would you think it could have done, should have done? Maybe I always, I would have loads of those kind of issues around the Irish rugby team, but not necessarily about myself. I just, just get on with it. I've never gone looking for a job. I just get on with it.
That's interesting because, when I talk to people about, the services that we offer, people say, how do you compare to somebody else? I say, I don't compare. I'm not better than somebody. I'm not worse than, I'm just different. I'm just myself. And, so it's interesting that you have a similar thought process. Yeah. We'll talk about sport in a different context because we'd have a lot of views, I would say, similar and opposing in many ones. So you then went back, Trinity, you graduated, you then went back and did a master's in UCD and you got a role, your first role. Where did you go then after that? You were going down the marketing route, obviously. So where did you tend to move into, post that initial role that you did after UCD?
So Johnson & Johnson were based out on Bellegarde Road, and they had quite a big production site and distribution centre, and their Irish head office, which was a large enterprise, was based out there. They asked me to join as the marketing manager for what was known as the PPD, the Professional Products Division. So a lot of people will know Johnson & Johnson for their Band-Aids and for their baby powders and their baby creams and lotions and so on. Recently, or more recently than then, and this is now 1985, they didn't have a very big pharmaceutical business. They do now, and they're one of the leaders who are trying to come out with the vaccine for COVID. They didn't have a very big optical division. They have very, very big. They have a huge contact lens business. They had just started off on dental alloys, which is just a giant business for them now and highly profitable. So they really were into things like sutures, drapes, dressings, basically items that hospitals would need for the care and protection of staff or patients. In some cases, both. So drapes would be used on surgical tables. They also be used for gowns for nursing and doctor and surgical staff. Dressings. I remember I was asked while I was there to write a paper on wound care management for bed sores for the Irish Nursing Times. So that's the business they were in. And PPD ran alongside their consumer business. It was basically items supplied directly to hospitals and large healthcare units. Every hospital at the time ran its own business. They were all part of their own independent health boards in different regions. They all had their own, each health board had its own board. Each hospital had its own procurement officer. They never talked to the other procurement officers. If you think of it, you think we were the size of, Europe. So there were some procurement managers in Hospital X, and I won't mention any names, that were really, really good. They would take the shine off your shoe. Other guys, girls, and most of them were guys, were really very ordinary, and you could always get an extra bit of margin out of them. I was brought in as marketing manager to put a marketing framework together for the professional products division. And it was my first, I'll come back to it later on, but it was my first kind of brush up against the health system. They came chasing me over the years for alcohol and soft drinks and dairies and everything else afterwards. But it was kind of in that health space. I left there after just over a year. I didn't go looking to leave, but when the opportunity to leave was given to me, I was very pleased. I thought that the people I worked with, I admired greatly. The people I worked for, I didn't.
Okay.
And I've always. It wasn't something I wrote down on the back of a piece of paper and stuck it to the back of the door at home. I will never work for people I don't like, but I've never worked for people I don't like. And if I feel something has changed, or if I feel that someone else has come in, and I just don't feel that it's right for me, I wouldn't stick around.
That takes confidence, though, Colin, doesn't it? Because there's many people, I would say, who will watch this podcast when it's aired, may not be in a position where they can say, I'm not going to work for the people I don't like. Because it does take a real set of confidence and courage, because, in your case, you made a point earlier on that you've never looked for a job. Jobs have always come your way, which is a nice position to be in. But for many people, they look for jobs. So, it's a great thing to be able to look back at your career to date and say, I've never remained working for people I didn't like. And, if we could all do that, it'd be great. I can't believe, and sometimes I actually genuinely can't believe. I go for a walk in the morning and I go, bloody hell, was this all a dream or what? So I can't believe how lucky I've been, and I have been lucky. I admit that. I think some of the luck comes around. So working with the CII, Confederation of Irish Industry, was a big kind of halo effect. They were very well known. The people in there were highly regarded. The whole thing was very professional. At a very early stage, they were willing to give you chances. So at an early stage, I was asked to go and represent Ireland on the research project in front of the EU body at the time in Luxembourg, who were coordinating everything. Now, I'd only ever been out of the country to Australia and maybe once to Spain and maybe to France, always with groups, always with friends. Or Australia, I guess, was on my own. But it was, with a kind of a student type of aspect.
But they were saying, no. And there were rules at the time. I went in, I was talking to my boss in CII, and he said, okay, you're ready to go tomorrow? So, I mean, everything's good. Yeah, I have all the files, you have all the information. Yeah. And he said, and as I was turning, he said, by the way, Colin, and he wasn't warning me. He wasn't lecturing me. He was helping me. Because as I turned, he said, by the way, Colin, if you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer. And I said, yeah, okay, fair enough, Niall. And he said, remember always. And it's funny how these little things land. To be a good liar, you have to have a very good memory. And he's right. Of course he's right. So if you don't know the answer to something, say you don't know. And if you do know the answer and you know it to be true, have the confidence to say it and get on with it. So, and that was one of the little lessons. That was when I was in third year in college. And you sort of go, that's a little thing that lasted the rest of my career, to be honest.
It's interesting, just an anecdote to that. My grandmother, God rest her soul, used to have a saying when we were young. And when you're young, you don't understand it. So, in a real Cork accent, she would say, you can escape from being a robber, but never from being a liar. And I could never understand that. I said, well, no, because if you're robbing, you're stealing and you get caught. And she said, no, because you could get away with it. But she says, if you tell one lie, you have to tell a second lie to back the first lie up, and a third lie to back the second. Yeah. And eventually you'll forget the first lie because where if you tell the truth, you never forget the truth. And like that, like your moment with your boss in the CI and my moment, my grandmother, there's little things, or even a Christian brother saying to you, I didn't expect you to do as well, in his own way. There are little things that shape you in different ways as your journey is moving on.
Absolutely. I mean, there's other things as well. I'm dialing a bit further forward, but I ended up working after leaving Johnson & Johnson. I ended up working in John Player's. The connection, I guess, was that John Player's managing director in Ireland was a guy called Jerry Grogan, who was an absolute star. Jerry had worked in marketing, in marketing promotions, and set up his own promotions agency, and was very well regarded in the whole space. And then he worked in Brooks Watson, and now he's working, and he was running WD&HO Wills and John Player and Sons, which was known as Player Wills.
Yes.
Which people might recognise now to be Imperial Tobacco. At the time, the third of maybe four players in the Irish cigarette market. But they also had a very attractive cigar range of products in the Henry Winterman's range. And they had pipe tobacco and other bits and pieces. They had a big manufacturing unit on South Circular Road, which is vacant for quite some time, and it's going to be I think it's going to be housing and commercial up there. I think I passed it the other day on South Circular Road. I remember Jerry asking me to go and renegotiate the distribution contract with Henry Winterman's, the agency contract with Henry Winterman's. And again, it's these small things that actually matter. So I'm over there in Eindhoven, and we're sitting down, and it's getting late, and it's at this time of the year, and it's dark, and we were getting nowhere. I feel like Boris Johnson now and Van der Leyen, getting nowhere, and they were adamant they weren't going to move, and I was adamant that I had I was coming with the right proposals. Done a lot of work in the background, a lot of preparation for it. Anyway, long story short, they said, well, we'll have to cut it short. Your flight's going to be going in 2 hours. It takes 1 hour to get back to the airport. And I said, it's fine. Just cancel the flight, and can I book a hotel, please? And it was the confidence of knowing that I was right and I was going to stay around. And it changed the whole dynamic. And it sounds like a small thing to people listening in, but it taught me about strength of argument. It taught me about confidence. It taught me about calling someone's bluff, which is really important in FMCG, every now and then, to say no. Or the fear of saying yes sometimes, agreeing on something. Some people just go on too long. And it was all of that was captured just in that one moment of saying, fine, just cancel my flight. I'll ring the airport and cancel the flight. And at the time, there wasn't online booking. There was a real issue to go and cancel flights and to book another one. And could you get out in the next 2 days? But I said, listen, if you can recommend a hotel, I'll stay in a hotel and get a taxi to it. And we'll go with this in the morning. They took a 10-minute break, came back in and said, I think we need to get this solved in the next half hour. And the deal was done. And if you look at what they wanted someone, I believe, and we became very close afterwards with the people. They wanted someone who they absolutely were confident was assured of looking after their business in Ireland. And I was saying, if you give it to us, this is what we're going to do, but you only on these terms. Give us as you renew the contract. And I think the strength of argument was, I'll stay here to prove the point. I don't mind staying on. And at the time, international travel wasn't so easy. Changing flights was virtually impossible and unbelievably expensive. But the argument was worth making and worth staying around for.
But the point about that, Colin, is that, and it's a great lesson for people listening, is that you have to have the courage of your convictions. And, whether that's saying yes or saying no, whatever the position is, you've got to have the courage of your convictions, because if you don't believe in what you're saying, if you don't have a belief and a passion in what you're talking about, the people at the other side of the table
absolutely
will sway you. And, that was a bold call. If you, as you say, international travel wasn't as easy. It wasn't a case of just booking a flight online. There was a real cost to the business. But the advantage is that for having the courage of conviction means that they then have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Because you've now said, okay, I'm going to stay until we get this deal done.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in my teens, there was a cigar with a white tip at the top.
Yeah, the Crappy Creme tips. Yeah.
They were the real cool thing. Talking when I was a teenager. I never had one. I just knew they were the cool thing.
Yeah. It's funny how different things go in and out of fashion. So one of the brands we had were more cigarettes. More were the long menthol flavored ones, very, very thin. I haven't seen them around in years. It's a bit like Black Forest Gatto. Different things going out of fashion, and you kind of wonder how were they ever there, and where do they ever go?
I think Black Forest Gatto went out of fashion because it was too good for the consumer.
Well, maybe we should come back and give us all a bit of a treat after the COVID.
Tell me then. So after John Players, when did you become, I suppose, focus on the management side of the business? Because up to now you're on the marketing side and you've been the marketing manager, but you're still driving marketing. Even in the conversation in Eindhoven, you're still driving marketing and deals. When did you make the switch into the management more and leaving the marketing? No, I'm not saying you leave the marketing ever behind, but it becomes a part of your role rather than the dominant aspect of your role.
Yeah. So I mentioned Jerry Grogan by name. Jerry's belief was very strongly that at the management team we're a collective. It wasn't, I'll deal with you on marketing, deal with you on. It was a collective, and we all sat around the table and we all discussed issues, and we were all expected to contribute to the issues. So, and this was never made explicit, but if I were looking back on it, I'd say Jerry treated us all as business people, not as marketeers and financiers and production people and whatever else. So I remember one occasion, and it's something which I'm very strong on. I believe that marketing, in many respects, has stopped being about business, and it's been about maybe busyness rather than business. But certainly, it's about marketing and marketing activities rather than the business itself, which I think is a real failing. And I might come back to later on. But at the time, Barry Desmond was the Minister of Health, and there was always kind of a rule of thumb, which became, and it still exists, which became very explicit, which was when a Minister of Health can't open a new hospital because there's no money, and there's no money in the country, he can't bring in GMS cards for everyone. He can't do lots of stuff. The best thing they'll do is bring out regulations on some product or some issue. So it could be a ban on soft drinks advertising. It could be a requirement to put calories on all takeaway food counters. In the 1980s, it was 1986 when I was there, and up to 89, it was bringing new health regulations on cigarettes. Very easy to do. No one's going to vote against fresh air, literally in that case, rather than just metaphorically. But caused mayhem. And one of the things they brought in was there was no longer any advertising allowed except on newspapers. So all radio ads, all in-store advertising, which was taking place, in-store radio advertising that you could hear as you walked around rather than just music. There was a lot of advertising, mostly of which is paid by the cigarette companies. And then they'd have other brands on it, other sectors on it. But that was all banned. You couldn't, except in cash and carries, you couldn't give out samples anymore at anything. You could give it out at your own functions if you had a private function in your own business, but you couldn't give them out at the John Player Tops, for instance, which we ran. You couldn't give out free cigarettes. So everything was literally bottled down and tightened up, including that we had to take down all of the external advertising that existed around stores, tobacco selling stores. So they would have Silkcut advertising for Gallagher's, and then they would have, McCarthy's shop, and they'd have a John Player Blue, and they'd have Gordon's shop. And this was a huge business, and we were told we had X number of months to get them down. And it was very clear it was a massive, massive task of taking them down. We used to have separate part of the budget control that I had was we were in charge of the electricity payment for the backlit signs that took up a lot of electricity to run these things all year long. So they were always backlit from 5 in the evening or 4 in the evening in the middle of winter all the way through to the morning time. And we would have separate accounts to pay for them. So we'd have several hundred ESB invoices coming into us every month to be paid. And we had a kind of a team that did it, but it was now going to be stopped. So all that had to be gone. We had to get them down. Some people just took them in a hurry, just took them down and turned them the wrong way around so you couldn't be seen while they worked out a better answer. Carol's had masses of them with Carol's number 1 and with Rothmans. And it was a major, major, major hit for the company. We were owned by a venture capital business, the Hansen Trust. And the Hansen Trust, all they ever were concerned about was, your 13 numbers they operated the business on. 11 they really focused on, 13 in total. And you got them and you're okay, never great, you're okay. You didn't get them and you were terrible. It was very binary and actually really quite cruel and aggressive. But we were going to lose 2 or 3 or 4 of those metrics by having to spend a pile of money. And I went in and said to the finance director and the MD, I said, do you mind me interrupting? They were having a meeting about it. It's kind of in my space, but I know it's now you're looking at company performance. Why wouldn't all this be put down as an exceptional cost? It is exceptional. This doesn't happen in the business. And the finance director looked at the MD, and the MD looked at the finance director and said, why didn't we think of that? Marketing is business.
Yes.
Marketing is not about just making the ads. And now I was going to be out of a job because these things had to come down. I joined the company when the regulations had already been printed and everything was now in place. So a good few friends of mine who had done marketing qualifications would say, why are you joining there? That's nuts. You won't be able to spend any money on TV. And I said, but no, it's about business. And the rules are there. The rules are there for everything, by the way. They're there for sport. They're there for business. Just get on with the rules and do the best job you can because it's the same for everyone. The big brand we had was John Player Blue. And we just focused everything on it as a business rather than just as, now we can't advertise. We'll become sulky and bad-mooded and, get all kind of upset. And it became a star brand. Very, very, very quickly, it became a star brand because the whole business focused around it. We were able to reorganize our profit and loss. We were able to work our P&L account and our balance sheet to that effect. We were able to tell Hansen Trust we'd come up with a solution. They thought, they probably at home went, this is great. They weren't going to tell us that, though, because they weren't into the word great. The Hansen Trust people, just to give your listeners a bit of an example, VCs can be really, really, they can be different from any other shareholder. So they would call the MD in and they would ask him a number of questions. What's going on with the market share of Super Kings? How come Henry Winterman's? What's going on with John Player Blue? Tell me about your bad debt provisions. What's going on? What's going on with your pricing model? Certain key customers. And then they would call me in and they would say, and they put you opposite each other so they could see the two of you. And the chair of the meeting it wasn't chair of Hansen Trust. He would say, we've just been talking to Jerry about the performance of X, and he's given us some answers. Could you give us your answers? And if they were different, you were a dead man walking. So we were really, really united because we knew everything about the business. We knew everything about bad debt provisions. We knew everything about bad debt in the issue of tobacco was massive, as in managing it. We managed it very well, but there were a lot of people always kind of trying to have one over on you. We would take mortgages out of people's houses to make sure that our shops or businesses generally to make sure that they did pay up because it was cash. Robbers would go and steal cigarettes to order. So it was a very, very, very unusual type of business. But the finance director would then be brought in, and myself and the MD would be at one end of the table. The finance director would be brought in at the top of the table, and they would talk down to this huge long room, and they'd say, we've just been talking to Colin about some answers, some questions, and Jared's given some answers already. Can you give us your view? And it was the first time I went to, I said, this is dysfunctional, this is nuts. They're trying to find, but when I look back on it, we were really united. We had to be. And it meant that we were all running the business rather than just standing in our own kind of in our own space, ignoring the rest of the ecosystem that is business. And marketing had a key part of that.
So let's roll forward, because to me the storm that you faced in John Player in having to pivot your business completely, which wasn't the word used back then. It was just you had to make changes and got on with it. But now it's called pivoting in the modern era. It's very much like the storm of COVID. It's a different storm. The pandemic has different implications. The sad thing is has health implications for people, and tragically people have lost their lives, which is much more important than any business that any of us are ever involved in. But in a business sense, you're non-exec director of two businesses, Feb Wines, we talked about, and Concern Worldwide. So, talk to me about the impact, if we focus on those two businesses, or charities, on what COVID has done to both of those and the challenges as opposed to both of those, individually.
So headlines, and without disclosing too many confidences, Fever Wines was very well known for, or is very well known for, a range of wines, largely for the restaurant, hotel, fine dining and events, corporate catering, large hospitality events, all of which stopped on the 13th of March. So very much they've had to go on to a new platform, do the best they can with what's open, and what the hard part for them is they open, they close, they open, they close, at the same time as trying to get a new range in, get the cost base corrected, get a new range in, and to refocus on generally what's called the off trade. So the off licenses, the supermarkets, the larger cash and the larger convenience stores and the like. I think hats off to the management. They've done a really, really good job of doing that. It was an existential threat. I mean, this was suddenly your business has the carpet has been pulled out from under your feet. It is a fundamental change. I joined the board relatively recently. But I'm very impressed with how resilient the sales force and the general management have been, not to get mithered by the issues, but to accept them and to realize we have to change. It would be very easy for people just to be absolutely so perplexed that they can't do anything. They just, they put their head down, they get into a terrible shape. The banks are screaming, the employees are up, the customer, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, when you're in the wine business in Ireland, you've got a whole bunch of principals who are looking to see what you can do. The people who actually own the wine, who are selling it into you from overseas, from South Africa, South America, Australia, New Zealand, or Europe, America as well, and Europe. So they're going to be at you. They've had the same problem all around the world. So they're looking for any kind of green shoots. Working with them, rearranging your portfolio, rearranging your sales team, being very aware of what the government are doing, not only on the PUP payments, but also on the what's opening, what's closing, what's the threat. If people are opening and closing like a kind of concertina all the time, that has impacts on cash flows for companies. What impact does that have on your debt position within the trade? So it's a very complex position, and I think the biggest hat off you'd have to say is they've stuck to the basics. They've found new basics, but they've stuck to them, and they have found new basics, and they've stuck to them. Religiously, it sounds almost not strong enough, but really a strong focus on what they need to be doing. And they also, I think, very much realise, and the board that I'm lucky to be a part of, very much realise that whatever happened, we need to be looking at what next needs to happen, because my view is that COVID will last, the impact of COVID, openings and closings, will last probably until close to this time next year, in which case there will be openings and closings of pubs, openings and closings of restaurants. There'll be, I imagine as we come out of Christmas, I imagine that we'll probably close down in-place dining, and it'll become either terrace dining out on the streets, or it'll be closed down again as numbers are bound to spike. So there'll be ongoing openings and closings. It may well be regional. It may well be a shop type or venue type. But back to normal, not for best part of another year. And how do you cope with that is going to be the big issue.
And then on concern, the challenges that they face?
The phrase that's been used by the United Nations, which I think is very apt, is that the NGO world we've lost 25 years in 25 weeks.
Okay. We've
lost 25 years of progress. And there have been huge progress in the last number of years on what's known as the bottom billion, the number of trying to do everything that's possible. And concern is a player in it, but I'm very proud of the work they do with 5,000 people in over 20 countries around the world, helping and just sticking to the issues. But there's loads of phrases go around, but one I heard the other day on a call was that people are being asked in certain parts of Africa in particular, and parts of Bangladesh and other areas in that kind of space, wear masks, don't social distancing, don't congregate, and that's really it's a deal breaker for an awful lot of people who actually rely on going to markets to sell whatever product they have or to buy whatever product they can afford. And they are very congregated. They are very condensed in terms of their numbers of people. They're very, very tense. And someone came up and said, there is the lottery of getting COVID compared to the certainty of dying if I don't do it. And that's the truth of it. So how do you tell people, no, wear the mask and stay away from people, 2 meters distance, don't go unless you have to, crowd numbers should be reduced. They're going, hang on a second, we'll do that, I'm dying. And mind the way, if I do it, I may die, but the other way I will die. And the lottery of getting COVID compared to the certainty of dying. I think that's an extraordinary thing in the 21st century to be saying around hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. And that's what it is, that the COVID impact will last well beyond a vaccine. And I know there's a lot of work going in to make sure, particularly from the Gates Foundation, to make sure that a lot of people outside the developed world can get vaccines as quickly as possible. And there's a huge amount of work going in from various organizations to try and sequester a certain amount of drugs towards the poorest of the poor. The issue for concern has been, again, many folds. The people who donate to us, and in some cases it's members of the public in either Britain, Ireland, obviously, or America. In many cases, it's state governments who are passing money towards us as part of their aid benefit budgetary process. All of the people who actually are major contributors to us have said, I might have given you money to do X, but in the light of the current environment, just do what you need to do, rather than actually saying, give me the money back because you're not doing X anymore. So there's been a lot of flexibility shown, a huge amount of understanding shown, and that's not, I don't think, temporary. I think people are saying, we trust you. You've built the trust over the years. We know you're doing the right thing. We know circumstances have changed. Just get on with us and keep us informed. So I'm obviously shorthanding a lot of the stuff, but that sense of, we know you, we trust you, we believe you, keep us informed is very, very encouraging. The focus in as a board member is you're always concerned about the safety of your people, and with 5,000 people, safety used to be about they're working in some of the most hostile places in the world. Not hostile in terms of aggression, although that can be a case, but weather, poverty, illness, and disease. So very, very challenging conditions. This adds on to it because now they're trying to manage themselves and their families while they're out in either they're from Africa and they're working in different parts of Africa, or they're from the so-called developed world and they've brought their families down to work with them on programs in the less developed parts of the world. So it's very, very challenging. And one of the areas that we're constantly focused on is the health and safety of our staff. Okay. And then the programs, all the activities that we have around the world. As I said, there's about 5,000 people. There's 23 countries, I think is the current number, that we're operating in. It's a total budget approaching 200 million euros. So it's a very, very big business, doing a huge amount of good in very difficult circumstances.
Before I let you go, Colin, you've written a book called Marketing is in Trouble. So if you were to give me a quick 30-second synopsis of what the book is about, and then people can go and purchase the book and find out and read it for themselves, what would you say in 30 seconds about marketing is in trouble?
So there isn't an agreed definition of what marketing is. There is no real understanding or acceptance of what it's trying to do. There's no real agreement as to how it should do whatever it's trying to do, even if they don't understand it. And people have become very specialized in communications rather than actually in the general area of business. So what was meant to be, if you go back as far as 1952, General Electric said that marketing had the authority across all of the brand and all aspects of sales, scheduling, production, delivery. 1954, Drucker came out, and Drucker would be a kind of a real high act to follow in any of the consultancy business. And he was saying that there are only two functions of a company. One is marketing and one is innovation. They are the essential functions, the two essential functions in any company. All other functions are costs. You can farm out anything. You can farm out selling. It's an operational function. You can farm out production. Nike don't own any factories. Coke hardly own any factories. You can farm out finance, HR, administration, IT, legal. You can farm them all out. You can't farm out what is the essential part of the business, which is getting and obtaining a customer by developing a brand and a proposition that will work for them or him or her over a longer period of time. That can't be farmed out. That is what the business is about. The business is there to create a customer. And if we don't understand that, and we don't understand then what it looks like when you do either arrive at success or failure, and you're not quite sure how you're doing that in the first place, then you're going to be in trouble. I did research which came in this time last year, which showed that to be the case, that marketers don't pay enough attention to what they're trying to do, who they're trying to do it with, and two, how they work with the rest of their companies or the rest of their colleagues in a company. And the desk research on my own experience over time would prove that the research wasn't wholly wrong, at least. If not, it probably was wholly right.
Well, in a classical marketing way, I'll say we were very thrilled to get you. We were absolutely thrilled to obtain your career and some really insightful thoughts as you shared with us today, Colin, in your career about things that a Christian brother said to you, that was said to you in John Clare, about not telling lies, tell the truth, have the courage, your conviction, strike me very strong. About, a business looking at all the executives as part of an executive team rather than siloed in that world, and so many other things that you share with us. I want to thank you so much, Colin, for taking the time to join the Mindset Shift. It's been a real pleasure for me to chat to you, and the best of luck with the journey going forward.
Well, thank you, Tim, and to all your colleagues.
Thank you for watching the Mindset Shift. Don't forget to subscribe to get a new episode delivered straight to your inbox. You can do this by following the details below.